It started as a normal morning at the airport. Laughter, announcements, the sound of rolling suitcases. But then, chaos struck. Out of nowhere, 14 police dogs broke formation and charged across the terminal. Passengers screamed. Officers yelled commands, yet the dogs weren't attacking anyone. They were surrounding a little girl no older than 5, clutching a teddy bear. Cameras came out. Some shouted for security. Others whispered, "Is she in danger?" But what those canines were doing wasn't an act of aggression. It was a desperate act of protection. They were protecting her from something no one could see, something that was about to take her life. What happened next shocked everyone watching. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. It began on a bright Sunday morning at Maplewood International Airport. Sunlight poured through the wide glass windows, reflecting off the polished floors as travelers hurried from gate to gate. Rolling suitcases clicked across the tiles, flight announcements echoed overhead, and families laughed as they rushed to make their connections. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary, until a sudden sharp bark cut through the noise. Heads turned. Then another bark followed, and another. Within seconds, the entire terminal fell silent. 14 German shepherds from the airport's canine unit stood alert, their eyes locked on something or someone near the center of the concourse. Their handlers shouted commands, but the dogs ignored every word. Passengers froze where they stood, cell phones lifting instinctively to record what was unfolding. At the center of the wide, sunlit hallway stood a little girl, no older than 5. Her pink jacket was slightly rumpled, her small hands clutching a worn-out teddy bear. The ring of police dogs had formed a perfect circle around her, each animal poised, tense, unmoving. For a heartbeat, no one dared breathe. Then one of the officers lunged forward, yelling, "Stand down!" But the dogs didn't move. Their growls deepened, eyes shifting between the crowd and the trembling child. The scene felt unreal, like a moment suspended in time. Whispers rippled through the terminal. "Is she in danger? Are they attacking her? What's happening?" A tall officer in a Navy uniform pushed through the crowd, his voice calm but urgent. "Everyone stay back." He motioned toward the canines, but even he looked uncertain, because what no one realized yet was that these dogs weren't preparing to strike. They were guarding something none of the humans could see. Officer Mark Jensen had seen almost everything in his 12 years with the K-9 division: bomb threats, smuggling operations, even high-profile rescues. But as he pushed through the crowd that morning, nothing in his training could prepare him for what he saw now. 14 of his own unit's dogs breaking every command, forming a perfect circle around a child. His boots clicked sharply on the tile as he approached, his hand instinctively resting on Rex's collar. Rex, his loyal German shepherd partner, was the most disciplined dog in the division, steady, fearless, and intelligent. Yet even he was on edge, tail stiff, ears forward, his gaze locked on the girl in pink. Mark stopped a few feet away, scanning the scene. The girl stood motionless, her eyes wide, her small body trembling. Around her, the other dogs breathed heavily, muscles coiled, their formation tight as if protecting her from an invisible threat. "Control your dogs," someone shouted from the back. "We're trying," another officer barked, frustration mixing with fear. Mark knelt beside Rex. "Easy, boy," he whispered, his voice low. But Rex didn't relax. His nostrils flared, sniffing the air, muscles quivering beneath his fur. Then with a quiet growl, he took a step forward. Protective, not hostile. Something clicked in Mark's mind. These dogs weren't disobeying orders out of aggression. They were responding to something they could sense, something beyond human perception. Mark rose to his feet, lifting his hand to calm the surrounding officers. "Hold positions," he ordered. "Nobody moves until I say so," the crowd murmured, phones still raised, recording every second of the unfolding mystery. Mark's gaze met the girl's. Her lips trembled as she whispered something he couldn't quite hear. For a fleeting moment, he thought he saw fear in her eyes, but behind it, there was something else, a silent plea. And though he didn't yet understand why, Officer Mark Jensen knew one thing with certainty: this was not a standoff. This was a warning. The little girl stood at the center of the circle, frozen like a statue. She didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't even flinch as 14 massive German shepherds surrounded her. Her tiny fingers clutched a tattered teddy bear so tightly that its fur was almost torn at the seams. Sunlight from the tall airport windows cast soft beams across her pale face, catching the faint shimmer of tears in her eyes. Mark's heart pounded. "Sweetheart," he called gently, taking a slow step forward. "It's okay. No one's going to hurt you." His voice was calm, steady, the same tone he used to soothe frightened civilians or panicked dogs. But the girl didn't respond. She just stared straight ahead, her blue eyes locked somewhere distant, as if she couldn't even hear him. Rex let out a low whine, pacing beside Mark. His gaze darted between the child and the other dogs, every muscle alive with tension. It wasn't aggression, it was instinct. He could sense something unusual, something hidden. The other canines began shifting slightly, noses lowered, bodies protective. It was as if they were forming a living barrier around her. The handlers exchanged anxious glances. They'd never seen behavior like this before. Mark crouched to Rex's level. "What do you smell, buddy?" he whispered. Rex sniffed the air again, his ears twitching. Then he growled softly, not at the girl but at the space behind her. Mark's breath caught. He followed Rex's gaze but saw nothing, just empty air, bright with sunlight and dust. Still, the hair on his arms stood on end. Suddenly the girl blinked, her lips trembling. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Please, don't let them leave me." A hush fell over the terminal. Mark felt the world tilt for a moment. Who was she talking about? Before he could ask again, Rex barked sharply, his body stiff, alert. The sound echoed through the hall like an alarm. Something was about to happen. A single bark shattered the uneasy silence, then another. Within seconds, the terminal erupted into chaos. Passengers stumbled backward, clutching their bags and children. Some screamed, others fumbled for their phones, recording the surreal sight. 14 German shepherds growling in unison around a tiny girl clutching a teddy bear. The echo of barking ricocheted through the glass and steel walls of the airport, turning the bright morning into a scene of pure tension. "Someone call airport command," a guard shouted, his radio crackling with static. "We need a lockdown on gate 4. Security officers moved in cautiously, forming a perimeter around the K-9 unit. Their hands hovered near their holsters, not out of aggression, but fear. They didn't understand what was happening, and that made it worse. Mark stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "Everyone stay calm. Step back and clear the area." His tone carried authority, but his eyes betrayed worry. The crowd hesitated. Some passengers hid behind benches. Others whispered theories, each one more absurd than the last. Maybe she's carrying something dangerous. No, look at the dogs. They're not attacking her. Then what are they doing? Flashlights flickered from approaching officers. A mother pulled her son close, tears in her eyes. The tension thickened until it felt like the whole terminal was holding its breath, and in the center of it all, the little girl stood still. Her pink jacket fluttered softly from the air conditioning, her eyes wide, unblinking. Rex and the other dogs remained motionless, their focus unwavering. Mark exhaled slowly. He'd faced chaos before, but never this kind, because deep down he realized something chilling. The dogs weren't the problem. They were the only ones who understood what the problem really was. As the tension rippled through the airport, Mark's thoughts drifted, just for a second, to the last time Rex had acted this way. It was 3 months ago, during a late-night freight inspection at the city's cargo docks. The air had been cold and heavy with diesel fumes. Rex had stopped mid-patrol, his ears pricking up, nose twitching as if he'd caught a scent no one else could. "Easy, boy," Mark had whispered, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. There was nothing unusual, just crates, pallets, and the distant hum of machinery. But Rex growled low, muscles tightening like coiled steel. He tugged the leash toward a stack of wooden boxes marked fragile. When the officers pried one open, what they found sent chills down their spines. Illegal explosives hidden among harmless goods. If Rex hadn't reacted, the entire shipment might have slipped through unnoticed. That night, the supervisor clapped Mark on the back. "Your dog just saved hundreds of lives," he'd said. But Mark didn't take the credit. He just looked down at Rex and whispered, "You always know, don't you?" Back in the present, surrounded by barking and confusion, that memory burned brighter than ever. Mark's instincts screamed at him to trust his partner again. Whatever was happening now, whatever had drawn the attention of 14 trained K9s, it wasn't random. He crouched beside Rex, placing a hand on the dog's back. The German shepherd's heartbeat was steady but strong, his breathing sharp with focus. "Talk to me, buddy," Mark murmured. "What do you see?" Rex's gaze flicked toward the little girl again, then to her teddy bear. He whined softly, nudging forward. Mark frowned. Something about that toy, or what was inside it, wasn't right. And suddenly, he understood. This wasn't over. "Rex, heel!" Mark's voice rang out, clear and commanding, the tone that could halt any K9 in mid-stride. But Rex didn't move, neither did the other dogs. 14 trained officers of fur and muscle stood their ground, eyes blazing, forming an unbreakable circle around the little girl. For a heartbeat, disbelief washed over Mark. These were the best trained dogs in the unit, animals that responded to voice, whistle, even hand signals with military precision. Yet now, nothing, not one twitch of obedience. "Handlers," Mark barked. "Recall your dogs." Commands echoed down the terminal, German, English, sharp whistles slicing through the air. Still, not a single movement. The only sound was the synchronized breathing of the pack, the low rumble of growls vibrating like distant thunder. Rex's eyes flicked to Mark for the briefest moment, an apology almost, then back to the girl. His nose lifted, catching a scent carried by the terminal's recycled air. He sniffed once, twice, and then barked so suddenly that every passenger flinched. "What is it?" one of the officers shouted. Mark's instinct screamed, "Something's there." He followed Rex's gaze to the girl's small hands. She clutched her teddy bear tighter, pressing it against her chest. The seams looked uneven, the fabric stiff where it should have been soft. "Rex, show me," Mark whispered. The German shepherd stepped forward slowly, his tail straight, muscles trembling. He stopped inches from the girl, nose pressed to the stuffed bear. His ears flattened, and he let out a deep, uneasy growl. Mark's pulse spiked. He turned to the others. "Nobody touches her," he warned. "Not until we know what's inside that toy." The handlers froze. The dogs held their ground. And somewhere in the terminal's quiet hum, the faintest sound echoed, a soft, metallic click. The air inside the terminal had gone thick, too quiet, too still. Every breath, every heartbeat felt loud enough to echo. Mark's gaze darted between Rex, the teddy bear, and the frightened girl clutching it to her chest. Something wasn't adding up. Then out of the corner of his eye he noticed a small glimmer, a faint reflection catching the light. It came from the girl's wrist. He crouched slowly, speaking gently. "Hey, it's okay. Can I see your bracelet?" The little girl hesitated, her wide eyes flicking toward the ring of police dogs as if seeking permission. Rex tilted his head, letting out a soft, reassuring whine. Only then did she extend her small arm. Mark's breath caught. Around her wrist was a thin silver band, engraved, delicate, but with a small embedded chip that blinked faintly beneath the surface. It looked more like medical tech than jewelry. He turned it slightly, squinting to read the words etched along its side. "Allergy alert. Epinephrine required." His stomach dropped. It wasn't a toy. It was a medical ID bracelet. "Call medical support now," Mark shouted, voice slicing through the stunned silence. "She's in danger." The officers exchanged quick glances, confusion mixing with urgency. "Is she sick?" one asked. Mark didn't answer. His mind was already racing. A child with a severe allergy. Her silence, her pale skin, the trembling. Rex began pacing, whining louder now, his nose twitching toward the teddy bear again. He barked once, short and urgent. Warning, not threat. Mark's pulse hammered. "There's something in that bear," he muttered. "Something connected to her." The girl's lips trembled. It's Mommy's gift," she whispered weakly. Mark's eyes widened. He leaned closer, heart pounding. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "did you eat anything before you got here?" The girl nodded faintly. "A cookie, with nuts." And that's when everything clicked. The color drained from the little girl's face. Her fingers loosened their grip on the teddy bear, and the toy slipped to the floor. A ripple of panic swept through the officers as her knees buckled slightly, her breathing shallow and ragged. "Mark, she's going into shock," one of the paramedics shouted, rushing forward with a medical kit. The crowd gasped, phones lowering as realization hit. This wasn't a standoff anymore. It was a race against time. Mark knelt beside the child, gently supporting her as her head drooped forward. Her skin had gone pale, her lips tinged with blue. "Stay with me, sweetheart," he said softly, his voice trembling for the first time. "Help's right here." The paramedic's hands moved fast, checking her pulse, her airway, her vitals. "Severe anaphylaxis," he muttered. "We need an EpiPen immediately." Rex barked once, sharp, commanding. Everyone froze as the German Shepherd darted forward, nose to the ground, scanning the area with lightning precision. He sprinted toward the row of chairs, sniffing bags, then stopped near a small pink backpack lying on the floor beside a coffee kiosk. Mark's eyes widened. "He's found something." Rex barked again, pawing at the zipper. The paramedic rushed over, unzipped the bag, and there it was. A bright yellow EpiPen case. Without hesitation, Mark grabbed it and knelt beside the girl. "We've got it." The paramedic nodded, steady hands working fast. "Hold her still." A quick press, a sharp click. The medicine entered her thigh. Seconds passed like hours. Then, the girl gasped, one deep, shuddering breath, and color began to return to her cheeks. The tension broke like a wave. Passengers exhaled in relief, some clapping, others wiping tears. Mark looked down at Rex, whose chest rose and fell rapidly. He placed a trembling hand on the dog's head. "You saved her again," he whispered, and for the first time that morning Rex's tail gave a single, tired wag. The tension in the terminal hadn't fully eased. Even as the little girl's breathing steadied and her cheeks regained color, Rex remained restless. His eyes darted around the floor, nose twitching, muscles tense. Something still wasn't right, and Mark could feel it too. Passengers had begun to lower their phones, murmuring softly, their earlier fear replaced by awe. But Rex wasn't done. He suddenly turned, sniffing the air with sharp, deliberate movements. Then, with a burst of energy, he bolted across the polished tiles toward a row of vending machines. "Rex!" Mark called out, sprinting after him. The German Shepherd ignored him, focused, unstoppable. He pressed his nose against the base of one machine, then began scratching furiously. The metallic scraping echoed through the hall. "What's he doing now?" one of the officers asked. Mark didn't answer. He dropped to one knee, shining his flashlight where Rex was digging. A faint sound reached his ears, the quiet buzz of machinery, but something else too, a soft beeping. Rex barked again, louder this time. His tail stiffened, his entire body locked on target. Mark's stomach tightened. He reached behind the machine, his gloved hand brushing against something cold and metallic. He froze. "There's a device back here," he whispered. The officers' faces went pale. Within seconds, the bomb squad was alerted. They swept in, scanning the area. The beeping turned out to be an electronic tag, part of a misplaced shipment sensor that had fallen behind the machine. Not dangerous, but it explained the strange frequencies the K9s had picked up. Still, Rex had been right to react. His instincts had led them to eliminate the last potential threat in the area. As the chaos subsided, the commanding officer shook his head in disbelief. "That dog doesn't miss a thing." Mark smiled faintly, resting a hand on Rex's back. "He never does." And this time, the entire terminal erupted in applause, not out of fear, but admiration. The crowd's applause faded into anxious murmurs as the paramedics checked the girl again. Though her breathing had improved, her pulse was still weak, her small body trembling in Mark's arms. The EpiPen had bought them time, but not much. "We need to stabilize her now," the lead medic said urgently. Her reaction was severe. The adrenaline's wearing off. Mark nodded, his mind racing. The nearest hospital was 15 minutes away, but every second counted. He turned to the officers. "Get that ambulance ready. We're not waiting for clearance, she goes now. The paramedic hesitated. We haven't completed the protocol, Mark cut him off. I'll take full responsibility. Without wasting another moment, he scooped the little girl into his arms. Her teddy bear dangled loosely from one hand, the silver bracelet still glinting faintly against her wrist. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment, unfocused but searching. Am I going to be okay? She whispered weakly. Mark forced a reassuring smile. You're going to be just fine, sweetheart, I promise. Rex barked once, stepping close to the gurney as if guarding her personally. His gaze was fixed, steady, protective. The paramedics lifted the stretcher, sliding her gently onto it. The moment they began to move, Rex followed beside them, refusing to leave her side. The sirens outside wailed to life. Passengers pressed against the windows, watching the flashing lights blur past the glass as the ambulance raced into the distance. Inside the terminal, the tension broke. Some people cried quietly, others simply stood still, shaken by what they had witnessed. Mark leaned against the glass wall, his hand resting on Rex's head. The dog's chest rose and fell, breath steady now, eyes still on the path the ambulance had taken. You did it, buddy, Mark whispered. You saved her. Rex looked up, tail swishing once, as if to say, it's what I was trained to do. Hours later, the chaos of the morning felt like a distant storm. The terminal had quieted, though the echo of barking still lingered in everyone's mind. Mark stood near the security office, Rex resting at his feet, both waiting for an update from the hospital. Finally, his radio crackled to life. Officer Jensen, came a voice, steady but heavy with emotion. The girl's stable. Doctors say she's going to be okay. Mark exhaled, his body relaxing for the first time in hours. He looked down at Rex, who lifted his head, eyes alert as if he understood every word. You hear that, buddy? Mark whispered, smiling faintly. You did it again. Moments later, the airport's head of security approached with a tablet in hand. We reviewed the footage, he said. You won't believe this. He turned the screen toward Mark. The surveillance video showed the exact moment the K-9s had surrounded the girl. They hadn't attacked or lunged. They'd moved with precision, forming a circle around her just as she began to lose balance. Their growls weren't aggression. They were warnings, signals to alert nearby officers. They sensed her distress before anyone noticed, the man continued, before the allergy symptoms even showed. It's like they could smell the chemical reaction in her body. Mark stared at the screen, speechless. He'd known K-9s were capable of incredible things, but this was beyond training. This was instinct, empathy. When the video ended, the man added softly, Your dog didn't just save her life. He trained the others to protect her too. Mark looked down at Rex, who gazed back with calm, intelligent eyes. In that moment, the truth settled over him. They hadn't been witnessing disobedience that morning. They'd been witnessing loyalty at its purest form. The next morning, sunlight poured through the hospital windows, bathing the white corridors in warmth. Mark walked quietly beside Rex, the rhythmic click of his boots echoing against the tile floor. He hadn't slept all night. Every few minutes, he'd looked at his phone, waiting for an update. Now finally, he was here, to see for himself that the little girl was truly safe. They stopped at room 214. Through the glass window, Mark could see her, small, fragile, but smiling faintly as a nurse adjusted her blanket. Beside her sat a woman with disheveled hair and tear-streaked cheeks, clutching her daughter's hand like she'd never let go again. When the woman noticed the uniformed officer and the German shepherd at the door, she froze. Her lips trembled as she rose to her feet. In 2 quick steps, she was in the hallway, tears spilling over again. You're the one who saved my baby, she whispered. Mark shook his head gently. No, ma'am, he said softly, resting a hand on Rex's collar. He did. The woman's gaze dropped to the dog. Rex stood still, tall, calm, his amber eyes steady. Slowly, she knelt before him, reaching out a trembling hand. You knew something was wrong, didn't you? She murmured. Rex blinked once, then leaned forward, pressing his nose against her hand. Gentle, reassuring. The mother broke down, sobbing quietly into his fur. Around them, the nurses paused, watching in silence. Even Mark had to look away for a moment, his throat tightening. After a while, the woman stood and placed her hand on Mark's shoulder. Please tell your partner. Thank you, she said through tears. He didn't just save my daughter's life. He saved mine too. Mark smiled faintly. He already knows. Rex wagged his tail once, just enough to say mission accomplished. By the following week, the story had spread far beyond Maplewood. What had begun as a terrifying scene at Gate 4 had become one of the most heartwarming moments ever captured on camera. Videos taken by passengers flooded social media. 14 police dogs forming a perfect circle around a fainting child, an officer racing to help, and one German shepherd leading the charge to save her life. The footage went viral within hours, shared by millions around the world under a single headline: K9 heroes protect little girl at airport, a miracle caught on camera. News anchors replayed the clip on every channel. Experts tried to explain how the dogs could sense the medical emergency before it happened, but no theory quite captured what people saw in those brown, loyal eyes, something beyond training. Something deeply human. At the airport, travelers began leaving flowers and thank you notes near the K9 station. Children drew pictures of Rex and the other police dogs standing protectively around a smiling little girl. Even airlines joined in, offering donations to the city's K9 program in honor of the team's bravery. A week later, a small ceremony was held in the terminal. Mark stood with his fellow officers as the police chief pinned a silver medal to Rex's collar. Cameras flashed. Applause filled the hall. But Rex, as always, remained calm, tail swaying, eyes fixed on Mark. For everyone else, it was history. For Mark, it was personal, because behind the headlines and medals, he knew what truly happened that day wasn't just instinct or luck. It was something far greater, a bond that couldn't be explained, only felt, and that bond had saved a life. The evening sky over Maplewood Airport glowed with streaks of orange and gold. Flights departed one after another, their engines humming softly against the fading light, but away from the crowd and noise near the edge of the airfield. Two figures sat in quiet reflection: Officer Mark Jensen and his loyal partner. Rex Mark leaned back on the bench outside the terminal, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. Rex sat beside him, posture proud but calm, his head resting lightly on Mark's knee. The medal he'd received that morning glimmered faintly under the setting sun. "You know," Mark said with a faint smile, "I've seen a lot of heroes in uniform, but none of them ever had four paws." Rex turned his head slightly, ears flicking at the sound of his voice. His tail thumped once against the bench leg, slow, deliberate. Mark chuckled softly, rubbing the dog's fur. "You've done good, buddy. Better than anyone could have asked for." Just then, the terminal doors opened. A small figure emerged. The little girl, wrapped in a tiny jacket, walking carefully beside her mother. When she spotted Rex, her eyes lit up. She let go of her mother's hand and ran forward, a folded piece of paper clutched in her tiny fingers. Mark stood as she approached. "Hey there, kiddo," he said warmly. "You look better." She nodded shyly and handed him the paper. "It's for him," she said, pointing at Rex. Mark unfolded the drawing. Crayon colors filled the page. 14 dogs standing around a smiling little girl in pink, sunlight streaming through airport windows. Above it, written in a child's uneven handwriting, were 4 simple words: "My angels at the airport." Mark swallowed hard, blinking back emotion. He crouched down beside Rex. "You hear that?" he murmured. "You're somebody's angel now." Rex looked up, eyes steady, calm. As if he already knew, the camera would fade there on a sunset, a smile, and a silent hero who didn't need words to remind the world what loyalty truly meant. A few days later, the Maplewood Airport K9 unit returned to routine duty, but nothing felt quite the same. People who once hurried past security now slowed down, offering warm smiles or whispered thank yous to the officers and their dogs. And in the center of every conversation, every photo, every story shared online, was Rex. Mark noticed it too. Wherever they went, travelers recognized the loyal German shepherd with the calm eyes and the silver medal shining on his collar. Children would run up to pet him, their parents telling them, "That's the dog who saved the little girl." But for Mark, it wasn't about fame. It was about something deeper, the quiet understanding that loyalty, instinct, and compassion still existed in a world that often forgot. One afternoon, while finishing his shift, Mark spotted a small package on his desk. No return address and just a single card taped to the top. He opened it carefully. Inside was a photo of the little girl and her mother standing together, smiling. The girl held her teddy bear close, a bright blue ribbon tied around its neck. On the back of the card, in a child's handwriting, were 6 simple words. "Thank you for saving my heart." Mark stared at the message, his throat tightening. He turned to Rex, who sat nearby, tail flicking lazily. "Looks like you got fan mail, partner," he said softly. Rex tilted his head as if listening, then nudged Mark's hand gently, the same way he had at the airport that day. Mark smiled. "All right, hero," he said quietly. "Let's get back to work." As the camera pans out, the terminal lights glowing, Rex walking proudly beside his handler, the narrator's voice fades in softly,